something going now. Crowd loving it. It's a ball, fly ball. All right.
3, 2, 1. Okay, guys, if you've been following us, clearly the last couple of weeks we haven't been together, Ryan and I, but finally we've made our bed and we're sitting in it.
Been seeing counseling?
No, I don't know. But gonna go over some Raptor news. I did a sort of a podcast by myself there a couple weeks ago, or a week ago. Just looking ahead to the schedule. What happened pretty much since that podcast went up is that the Raptors still haven't done that great, but
a lot of losses.
They took out Phoenix 101-97, and then they lost what turned out to be a heartbreaker because they were down 19. They lost by 3 to 113-110.
That statement is a broken record for this team this year. How many of those games have they... We can get into that at a different time if you really want to, but I mean, how many close games, fourth quarter losses, that seems to be the repeat shuffle story for the Raptors. Repeat shuffle.
Yeah.
Heartbreaker, fourth quarter.
I think with this team, my real issue with it is that you can see that there's some potential on it. You can see that there are some players on it, but the defense doesn't seem to be playing as well as they did last year.
No.
Which is kind of surprising with the Dwayne Casey team. I mean, if you look at their defense this year, it's actually one of the worst. I mean, they're sitting 27th overall, giving up 101.9 points a game.
It's astoundingly high from last year.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have the stat from last year in front of me, but I seem to remember it being.
It was in the low 90s.
Much more than that. Yeah. Almost 10 full points, I would think.
And so I think that's a real major issue. Now, saying that, we've been on the road a lot, so I think it's hard to really get a good idea if that number should be good or not. I mean, it's harder to win on the road in the NBA than it is, at home.
Absolutely. I mean, the road is tough in the NBA. I mean, this comes down to it in the playoffs too, right? The NBA is a home team league right now and has been for the last few years.
Yeah, unless you're a major force in the NBA, you're normally winning at home and you're losing on the road. I mean, that's why a lot of the teams end up very close to that 500 mark, and that determines the 6th, 7th, 8th seeds normally. So,
right. So you got to win a few of those road games. You got to win them.
Yeah, and that makes a difference. So tonight, and this podcast will probably come up tomorrow, so who knows what the result is, but I think this is a real winnable game. I mean, they lost a couple nights ago in Denver by 3. They really made a good impact in the fourth quarter. They look like the team we've been expecting in the fourth quarter, last game. And the first 3 quarters they were awful, to say the least. But tonight, going into Sacramento, they're 4-12. I think if they're going to win one on the road, this would be the one we should be looking for them to sort of take advantage of.
Well, because and sorry, just to finish the schedule there. I mean, tonight they need to win because they go in Friday against Utah, right?
Yeah.
And this is another one of those road trips. I mean,
it's a 5-game road trip.
It's a long one, and by that's what I mean by another one of those road trips. I mean, any road trip is long. I mean, they're not playing the top teams.
Then they have Portland and they have the Clippers as well on the road before they even get home.
Yeah, it's a tough trip, and it's as you said, you got to win the games that are winnable. If you can say that and not get laughed at the same time. And
honestly, the trouble with the team right now is that the team is 1-10 on the road this year.
1-10 on the road. And
if you look at their record, they're 4-14. So I mean, they're 3-4 at home, which isn't great by any stretch.
So 11 road games to 7 home games,
and they still have 4 more to go.
Yeah.
So you're about to get 15 to 7. That's more than double.
Well, and let's face it, the road itself is not the other obstacle. It's not the only obstacle, I should say. This team is struggling. Their star players are struggling, or who should be their star players anyway, are struggling.
Well, I think Lowry's been out of shape since coming back from the injury. He didn't get in the preseason that much either because he was injured. I think Bargnani's been sort of out of shape all year because he didn't play all summer. I think DeRozan's been good, but once Lowry and Bargnani get into the rotation of things, he does not get in shots. Maybe he was at the beginning. That doesn't mean he's not still playing okay. And then Petrus comes in this week and gives them some veteran leadership, which I think is really good. Actually, the team needs it. They need some veteran leadership.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily translate into wins at this point.
So would you say, though, just based on what you said there, are you banking on the fact that Bargnani is out of game shape? Are you attributing that to his slow start at this point?
Absolutely. That's what I'm attributing to.
Yeah. Because he's been the disappointment. I mean, right now, if you listen to any media in Toronto here, whether it's radio or television or the print, they are all over Bargnani, and no one seems to know what's going on with this guy. Not to say you have the only answer. I mean, obviously, you know, if you were, you'd be making billions somewhere predicting NBA stats.
I think the problem with Toronto and Bargnani, for instance, A, he's not being aggressive enough. B, I don't think he's in game shape. And C, I think we expect a lot out of him, and that's fine. I mean, he's one of our star players. I think the other thing is he showed a glimpse of 13 games at the beginning of the season last year that fans now want to see on a game-to-game basis, and he's not producing that. Is it frustrating? Absolutely. Do I think he can improve? Absolutely. Do I think the front court of Valanciunas and Bargnani could be great in the future? Absolutely. Do I think they're going to get a chance to grow together? No, I don't, because I think there's going to be too much pressure to make a deal. Now, saying that,
which was where I was going with this next, is that this is where people are saying is trade this guy and this guy. I mean,
however,
now get something for him.
But here's the thing: you make a deal for Bargnani right now. When you consider him on the low end of where like his value is,
absolutely, yeah.
So, do you think it's a smart move to trade him at this point?
No, because you and I touched on this in an early podcast, Raptors preseason podcast we did, where, and what do you get back for him at this point, right? I mean, he was injured all last year, for most of last year. He had his first ever glimpse. So I still don't think you're going to get top dollar value for him, even without him playing a game this year, based on the fact that he's had a calf injury a couple times. So in that podcast, I remember saying, you know, if you're going to get anything back, you're not going to get anything back for him that's going to necessarily improve your team right now. You're going to get prospects and picks. You're not going to get a star player back from him. So my stance is I don't think you can trade him at this point if you're going to try to win now.
No, because the GMs are going to smell blood in the water.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, this team is struggling. They need to make a move. And we're just going to, fleece them. Because
and by win now, I don't mean championship. I mean playoffs.
Yeah.
Hitting that 8th, 9th.
Now, saying that, I think after this road swing and after this sort of road trip, I think the Raptors can be better in the second half than they in the first half. But I think the issue is they're digging themselves such a hole now.
Right.
That's really where the problem is going to lie.
And that was sort of also another question I was going to ask you is, when does this become insurmountable? When does this become a rebuild, or at least a selling at the trade deadline sort of thing, where we just can't come back from this and challenge for a playoff spot?
I think if you're a Raptor fan, first of all, you got to be happy with how Ross and Valanciunas have played.
Absolutely, those two have been standouts,
and they're rookies.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good sign for the future. I think Bargnani playing poorly is actually a good thing if you consider the fact that if he can get in game shape and start playing better. I think that's a good thing. Right? Because you got your rookies playing fairly well right now. If you can get Bargnani back on track, DeRozan just stay with what he's doing, and then Lowry sort of start getting into shape, you got a guy like Petrus, bring back in the fold Fields, a healthy Fields, bring back in the fold a healthy Anderson, all of a sudden your team looks a lot stronger than it does right now.
So here's the thing too, Calderon's been getting a ton of ton of court time. He's the guy I trade right now.
Well, he is the guy that's going to be traded, and I think he's the trade piece this year. Now, I'm not sure what he gives you, but he is a $10 million cap coming off the books. He's a guy who can run an offense, so he is your trade piece. I think you also have to look at, if you're not going to trade Bargnani, which, like I just suggested, that's probably not the best move in the world. I think you may look at moving a Amir Johnson or a Davis as a package deal to see what else you can get in terms of a better player back.
And based on the amount of time Amir has had on the court, he's looked pretty good this year. He's been a bit of a spark plug for this team.
And that's hard to give up at the same time, because he's still a young player, but at the same time, sometimes you have to give up things to get something. So,
and that again, you and I have talked about this with not just the Raptors, but when do I think in the NBA, if you don't have that star-studded front lineup, you need depth to run all night long against those teams. And the Raptors right now, I think, as we said at the start of the season, are a very deep team. Maybe not the most talented team, but fairly deep. And that's my fear, is trading away a couple of those guys, and you really weaken your bench.
Yeah. I think the other issue at some point, too, is that the team does continue to struggle. And let's say that they keep going on the path they are at. What do you do? Do you tank the season? Do you trade away your pieces looking to the future? Or do you stay status quo and try to do well? Because if you don't have a top 3 pick, that pick's gone anyways. and then next year.
No, it's protected, I think, right? It's top three.
Top three protected.
But
that's what I mean. So it'd be
yeah.
tank. There's no guarantee that you're going to get a top three because it's a lottery system.
Yeah.
And the other issue I think too is next year is when the Raptors really want the first overall pick. If they're going to tank.
That's Wiggins year coming up.
And that's Wiggins year
2 years.
Because you want a Toronto superstar in your team. That would make wonders.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the question, and we don't need to go into huge detail about it because it's this podcast is getting long. If they tank this year per se, or on purpose or not,
yeah,
does Colangelo survive another bad year?
I don't think he does. And I'm a Colangelo fan, but I don't think he survives it.
No, they gotta produce this year, or he's gone.
And it's not I don't think it's a necessary slam against him as per se as the fact that he's been in charge for so many years, and the results haven't been there. Eventually, he has to be held accountable.
You can't keep going through rebuild after rebuild.
You can't do it, and I'm not even necessarily saying it's his fault. I mean,
he's a bit of a victim of circumstance too. I mean, we're in a market right now that players don't necessarily want to come to.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, and it's funny when we were just talking about it. If you look at his draft picks, you look at his draft selections. DeRozan has turned into a fairly capable player. Ross, we both said we just like. Valanciunas is clearly looking like he's going to be a superstar one day. So in terms of what his development was, in terms of who he's been drafting, it's actually been a fairly good course. I mean, even if you look at Bargnani's year, he was probably, I know he went first overall, but that was a very weak draft class. I mean, he drafts very well. He's got the teams, but the teams haven't been bad enough to get the first overall pick in a year where you can get a number one guy. Bargnani's clearly not that guy. And
well, I think part of it for me,
I
think part of the upside when you look at the rebuilds that he's gone through, and there's been a couple of them. That's something to me that I the flip side for me, anyways. I look at it, glass is half full. Is that here's a GM that recognizes very quickly that a team is not going the direction it needs to go in this league, and blow up the roster very quickly and change a lot of faces. It's just that the faces coming in haven't quite lived up to potential, or just he hasn't been able to pull the trigger on that final big deal that will bring somebody here. And then whether that's his fault or whether that's those stars who usually have no trade clause and has them saying where they go, don't want to come to Toronto at this point. So that's for me, that's the good side of the Colangelo rebuild after rebuild after rebuild, if you want to call them all rebuilds. But the downside is this is where the market loses patience, right? I mean,
and I think the one last issue, and we should definitely wrap this up, is Colangelo is going to have to look to try and make a big move, because if he does realize this is his last year, you have to assume his next move will be a big one, because he's got to look to make the playoffs, because he wants to keep his job here, he wants to keep his reputation, quote unquote. You got to think he's making a big move. Well, and does that hurt or hinder the
mortgage the future kind of? Exactly. You mortgage the future to save his job. Potentially, that if he saves his job for this year, does he then struggle next year because he's given up too much just to save this year?
Yeah.
Or does he keep the cupboard half full for next year?
So that's really that's a question moving forward.
Well, and this is, again, we're going to wrap this up real quick. This is where we're at here, folks, in Toronto, where we're looking at a bunch of GMs who are on the hot seat. And Colangelo, who is a good GM, I think both of us agree, we like him as a GM. It's just it's been a long enough struggle that it may be time for a change. The Leafs are in the same boat. Anthopoulos, the Jays has done a good thing this year, we hope, we think. So it'll be interesting in this Toronto market, and this is what the media is about up here. It's all about the GMs. And the Raptors are in focus because they are the only team going right now in Toronto.
All right, guys, we'll tweet tonight's game. We'll tweet during Friday night's game. Let's hope the Raptors can pull one of these out. We'll be back at you next week with some more Raptors.